Sophia Marlowe stood in the threshold of her gilded bedroom, her hands gripping the carved mahogany doorframe so tightly that her knuckles whitened. Across the room, her husband, Adrian Blackwell, adjusted the cuffs of his Italian silk shirt, every motion calculated, polished, detached. He didn't notice her at first, or perhaps he did and simply didn't care. But what caught her gaze, what froze her heart in place, was the smear of crimson lipstick staining his pristine white collar. It was the kind of red that did not whisper but screamed. Not the pastel pink favored by Adrian's aging business contacts, not the muted shades worn by society matrons, but a bold scarlet, the color of seduction, danger, and betrayal. Sophia's eyes lingered on it, memorizing its placement, its curve, the damning evidence of another woman's lips brushing against the man who had not touched her in 9 long months. 9 months of polite distance, twin beds in separate wings of their estate, of her reaching out only to be met with cold avoidance. 9 months of excuses, fatigue from the board meetings, stress over acquisitions, the eternal excuse of a man whose heart had quietly relocated elsewhere. And now, here was proof, as bright and undeniable as spilled blood across snow. "Do not wait up for me tonight," Adrian said, his voice cool and clipped. He smoothed his tie and checked his reflection in the ornate mirror above their marble fireplace. Once burning with devotion, his steel-gray eyes now reflected nothing but calculation. He still had the sharp cheekbones and immaculate posture of the man she had fallen in love with, but where once there had been warmth, there was only ice. Sophia's breath caught in her chest, but her voice when it emerged was steady, velvety, laced with the kind of poised sweetness that masked blades beneath its surface. "Of course, darling," she murmured, stepping into the room. Her silk robe brushed against her skin like a whisper of armor. She approached him slowly, as if nearing a predator in its cage. "Will you be at the Eldridge merger dinner tomorrow?" she asked, her tone casual. "Or should I reinvent your excuses?" His gaze finally slid to her, dismissive and faintly irritated. "I will be there. Try not to embarrass me this time. The last thing I need is you fumbling through economic discussions with my board members." The words were daggers, cruel not because they were true, but because once not so long ago, he had celebrated her intellect. He had adored her sharp insights, hung on to her every analysis of global markets, and told her she was the only one in the room who truly understood him. Now he acted as though she were ornamental at best, an inconvenience at worst. Sophia smiled thinly, moving closer until she could reach for his collar. Her fingers brushed the scarlet stain, her eyes never leaving his face. She felt him stiffen beneath her touch, not with longing, but with barely concealed disgust. She pressed the edge of a tissue against the fabric, dabbing at the lipstick as though erasing a crime scene. "You must have brushed against someone," she said softly, though her words dripped with pointed intention. "There is lipstick on your collar." For the briefest of moments, his carefully curated mask faltered. She caught it, the flicker of panic in his eyes before indifference swept back into place. "Madame Belrose kisses everyone," Adrian replied smoothly. "You know how the French are." Madame Belrose was 75 years old, and her lipstick was a pastel rose. Sophia knew it. Adrian knew she knew it, yet he lied, bold and brazen, because that was what men like him did when they believed their wives too docile to challenge them. "How silly of me," she replied with mock lightness, her tissue wiping away the crimson trace. "There. All gone. We cannot have you walking into the office looking anything less than immaculate." "Do not do that," he snapped suddenly, jerking away from her hand. His tone was sharp, like a man not rejecting lipstick, but rejecting her touch. Sophia's heart clenched. Once, he kissed her fingers when she cupped his face, and once, he whispered that her touch was his salvation. Now he recoiled from her as though she carried disease. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 8, the sound echoing like a countdown to doom through the vast, silent corridors of Blackwell Manor. The estate sprawled across acres of manicured gardens, a fortress of wealth and privilege. Yet within its walls, there was no warmth, no laughter, only the cold emptiness of a marriage crumbling behind closed doors. "Your mother called," Sophia said, turning to safer ground. She folded the tissue neatly and placed it on the dresser. "She insists we attend the family dinner on Sunday. She says it is important." A shadow flickered across Adrian's face at the mention of his mother, Eleanor Blackwell, a woman renowned for her icy composure and ruthless precision. From the first moment, Eleanor had made it clear that Sophia did not measure up, not enough pedigree, not enough connections, not enough of everything that mattered in the Blackwell dynasty. "We will be there," Adrian said flatly, checking his Patek Philippe watch. It gleamed on his wrist, a wedding gift from Sophia. She wondered if he wore it for sentiment or for the $35,000 value. Likely the latter. "No doubt, she wishes to lecture us again about providing an heir." An heir. The word was a mockery. He had not touched her in nearly a year, and now suddenly he spoke of heirs. Sophia raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a razor's smile. "Shall I prepare for another discussion about my breeding potential?" Adrian's mouth twitched into a semblance of a smile. On anyone else, it might have softened their features. On him, it looked like a wound. "Just smile and nod, Sophia. It is what you are good at." The dismissal stung, but she did not flinch. Instead, she inhaled, catching again that faint whiff of French vanilla and jasmine, the signature perfume of Celeste Duval, the new head of acquisitions at Blackwell Enterprises. Sophia had smelled it, clinging to Adrian's suits for months now. She had not spoken it aloud until tonight. "Adrian," she said quietly as he moved toward the door. He paused, hand on the frame, his broad shoulders tense. "I love you," she said. The words trembled in the air, fragile as glass. They sounded less like an affirmation and more like a confession whispered at a funeral. He froze. His knuckles whitened on the doorframe. She thought for a moment, just a heartbeat, that he might turn and meet her eyes with something more than indifference. Instead, he said, "I will be late tonight." And then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the marble staircase, fading into silence. Sophia stood alone in the cavernous bedroom. It was her room now, not theirs. His presence lingered in faint traces, the cologne on his unused pillows, the wedding photograph still perched on the nightstand. But she had noticed last month that he had removed her picture from his office. The erasure had begun long before she acknowledged it. She drifted to the window overlooking the gardens where they had renewed their vows in front of family and friends only half a year ago. 6 months since that night of laughter and promises. 6 months since he had kissed her as though she were oxygen. 6 months since Celeste Duval had entered their lives with her ambition wrapped in perfume and stilettos. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from the spiral of memory. A message from Elena, her oldest friend, who has been loyal since college. "Breakfast at the Saint. Regis, you sound like you need it." Sophia smiled faintly, the first genuine smile of the morning. Elena had been there through the whirlwind romance, the glittering wedding, and the slow unraveling. Yet even Elena did not know everything. No one did. She crossed to her closet, running her fingers along the silk and satin dresses Adrian had once loved. She could wear ashes now, and he would not notice. She selected a simple black Givenchy dress, elegant but understated, armor for the battles ahead. As she dressed, her mind returned to the hidden manila folder in the false bottom of her jewelry box. Inside were photographs. Adrian entering the Ritz-Carlton with Celeste, time-stamped during a supposed board meeting. Copies of text messages retrieved from Adrian's laptop, left recklessly logged in. "My darling Celeste," they read, "just a few more months and we will be free. Pathetically devoted." That was what Adrian had called her in one of the messages. She paused before the mirror, applying her lipstick in a shade of rose, gentle, dignified, unlike Celeste's brazen crimson. She studied her reflection, a woman of 28, skin glowing bronze, eyes sharp and intelligent. A woman underestimated her entire life by professors, colleagues, mother-in-law, and now by her husband. Adrian believed she was too blind to see his betrayal, too weak to act even if she did. He thought he was playing chess, while she stumbled through checkers. He had no idea she had already set the board, captured his queen, and was only 3 moves away from checkmate. The lipstick on his collar had not been his mistake. It had been his first step into her trap, and it was only the beginning. The Blackwell estate stretched across 40 acres of sculpted gardens, marble fountains, and tree-lined avenues that whispered of old money and older secrets. It was a palace of triumph, a symbol of power and success to the world outside. To Sophia, it had become a gilded prison. Every echoing hallway carried memories of what had once been a home filled with laughter and promises. Now, the vast rooms rang only with silence and the faint, haunting trace of perfume that did not belong to her. Sophia wandered through the long gallery that morning, her heels striking the polished floor like the ticking of a metronome, steady and deliberate. Portraits of Blackwell ancestors lined the walls, stern faces painted in oils staring down at her with the same judgment she felt daily from Adrian's family. The air was cool, almost icy, as if the walls rejected her presence. It had been 9 months since Adrian had last touched her. 9 months since warmth had existed between them. 9 months since she had felt like more than an ornament placed carefully beside his empire. The servants walked lightly, speaking in hushed tones. They even sensed the tension thickening, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Mrs. Ellison, the housekeeper who had served 3 generations of Blackwells, gave Sophia a sympathetic look when their paths crossed in the library, but said nothing. Sympathy was dangerous in this house. Sophia moved toward the West Wing, which Adrian had claimed as his own. She rarely ventured there anymore. He had filled it with his world, suits arranged like soldiers in his walk-in closet, briefcases and files strewn across the mahogany desk, decanters of brandy, half drained after late nights of so-called business meetings. She lingered at the doorway, not daring to step inside. The faint hum of his presence clung to the space like a ghost. Her phone buzzed in her hand. It was Elena again. "You're quiet. Too quiet. Meet me for brunch tomorrow." Sophia typed a quick reply. Yes, tomorrow. She needed someone who saw her as a woman, not as a Blackwell wife, not as a vessel for heirs. She turned back toward her own quarters, her sanctuary carved out of the cold expanse of the mansion. Her bedroom overlooked the rose garden, the same garden where Adrian had kissed her under fairy lights the night he proposed, whispering promises of forever. She had believed him then, foolishly, recklessly. Now she stared out the window and saw only the battlefield their love had become. On her dressing table lay the remnants of her armor, lipstick, powders, gowns, chosen carefully to project an image of elegance and grace. Adrian no longer noticed. The nights he returned at all, he went straight to the West Wing without so much as a glance in her direction. The separation had become routine, so routine that society had begun whispering, and in their world, whispers were daggers. She sat at the vanity, staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked calm, composed, but she could feel the storm building beneath the surface. Her mind returned to the folder hidden in her jewelry box, the photographs of Adrian and Celeste, the text messages dripping with betrayal. She had the evidence, the power, but timing was everything. She could not confront him yet. He believed he held all the cards. Let him. It only made the eventual checkmate sweeter. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Adrian's secretary, Miranda, stood in the doorway holding a stack of envelopes. "These arrived by courier," she said quietly. Miranda's eyes darted nervously around the room, as though afraid the walls might hear. Sophia thanked her and took the letters. Among them was an invitation embossed in gold. The ambassador's ball was hosted at the city's grandest hotel. Sophia traced the letters with her finger. She knew Adrian would insist on attending. It was a stage, a theater for appearances, and appearances were everything to him. She would need to be flawless, but appearances could be turned into weapons too. She opened another envelope, this one from Eleanor Blackwell. Her mother-in-law's handwriting was sharp, precise, as unforgiving as the woman herself. Family dinner, Sunday. Attendance expected, discussion of heirs, no excuses. The words stabbed at Sophia, each one a command disguised as civility. Eleanor had never accepted her. To Eleanor, Sophia was simply a placeholder until Adrian produced an heir, a womb dressed in couture. Sophia folded the letter carefully, sliding it into the drawer with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Let Eleanor think she was submissive. Let Adrian believe she was blind. Neither knew the truth. Sophia was waiting, watching, calculating. The clock struck noon. Somewhere in the distance, she heard Adrian's voice, low and commanding, speaking on the phone. The sound traveled through the halls, distorted but distinct. She moved silently closer, her heart pounding with dread and determination. She stopped just before the door to his study, pressing her ear to the wood. Yes, everything is on schedule. Adrian's voice was smooth, the voice of a man who had mastered lying. She suspects nothing. Just a little longer. Once the timing is right, we will proceed. The board will have its assurance. The family will have their heir. And she will have nothing. Sophia's blood turned to ice. She stepped back quickly, afraid he might open the door and find her listening. She walked swiftly down the hall, her heels clicking too loudly, betraying her shaking composure. She reached her bedroom and closed the door, her breath ragged. Heir, assurance, nothing. The words echoed in her mind like a curse. Adrian was not merely betraying her with another woman. He was planning something bigger, something crueler. A scheme that would use her, discard her, leave her with nothing. She sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the duvet until her knuckles ached. A memory surfaced unbidden. Adrian standing in the rain 2 years earlier, shouting up at her window with roses in his hand, his suit ruined, his devotion burning in his eyes. "I'll tear down the stars for you," he had cried. She had believed him. How had that man become this stranger? Or had the stranger always been there, hidden behind charm and passion until the mask slipped? Her phone buzzed again. A message from Elena. "He's hurting you. Why are you still there?" Sophia typed slowly, carefully. "Because this isn't just love anymore. It's war." She stared at the words, her finger hovering before pressing send. War. Yes, that was the right word. The mansion around her was no longer a home. It was a fortress, and every corridor was a battlefield. Adrian thought she was outmatched. He thought she was just another pawn in his empire. But Sophia knew the truth. She was not a pawn. She was the queen. And queens did not fall, queens conquered. The lipstick on his collar had been the first move. The whispered phone call was the second. And Sophia Marlowe was ready to play the game to the end. The mansion's cold walls had watched her suffer long enough. Soon they would witness her rise. The scent of lavender still lingered in the east parlor, faint and ghostly, a remnant of evenings when Adrian used to surprise Sophia with freshly cut flowers arranged in crystal vases. Once upon a time, that fragrance had meant love. Now it was a little more than a cruel reminder of what had been lost. She sat at the piano, her fingers drifting across ivory keys that had not felt his hands guiding hers in months. Music had been their language in the early days, melodies shared late at night, promises whispered between chords. Now, silence was the only song left in their house. Sophia closed her eyes and let memory carry her backward, to the whirlwind that had once been their courtship. She had been standing on a stage at the International Economic Summit, presenting her doctoral research on global trade instability, when Adrian Blackwell had entered the hall. He had been magnetic, commanding, the heir to a financial empire, and had every reason to ignore a young scholar. Yet he had sought her out afterward, challenging her conclusions with sharp wit and relentless charm. They had debated for hours, moving from academic theory to personal philosophies, their words colliding like sparks until something undeniable caught flame between them. By the time dawn painted the city skyline, Adrian had whispered against her ear, "You are the most brilliant woman I have ever met, and if you let me, I will spend my life proving I deserve you." Sophia had laughed then, but she had also believed him. For 3 months, he pursued her with a limitless passion. Dinners under candlelight, he listened as though every word from her lips was scripture. Weekend trips to Paris, Rome, and New York, where he treated her not as an accessory, but as the axis on which his world turned. He had memorized her favorite authors, quoted poetry in the rain, sketched her smile on the margins of his business notes. He had been relentless in his devotion, and she had surrendered, blinded by the radiance of his love. Sophia could still see the night he stood outside her apartment at 3 in the morning, soaked in rain, clutching roses ruined by the storm. He shouted to her window that he would tear down the stars if it meant keeping her. Neighbors had laughed, taxis had honked, but Sophia had opened the door, her heart already his. That night, they had promised each other eternity. That night, she had believed fairy tales were real. Now the memory tasted like ashes. She rose from the piano and walked toward the long corridor where portraits of the Blackwell family lined the walls. In each frame, stern patriarchs and elegant matriarchs gazed down with cold authority. Adrian had once told her, "We will rewrite this history, you and I. We will be the first to build this dynasty on love, not obligation." She had kissed him then, believing he meant it. Now she wondered if he had ever truly intended to defy his bloodline. The mansion had become a museum of their past. The library where they used to read together was now his war room for mergers. The garden where he once whispered vows beneath a canopy of lights was now where she watched him whisper secrets into another woman's perfume. The bedroom where he once worshipped her had become an empty mausoleum. Sophia's mind drifted to one memory in particular, one that haunted her most nights. It had been just after their wedding, when whispers had already begun among society's elite. She had overheard one guest sneer, "She married him for his money." Adrian had pulled her aside, eyes blazing, and declared that she is my everything, mind, heart, and soul. Without her, I am nothing. He had kissed her then with such ferocity that the room had gasped. For months afterward, she had carried that moment like armor against the world's judgment. But now, when she replayed it in her mind, she wondered if it had been truth or simply performance, one more calculated move in a life built on manipulation. Her phone buzzed on the vanity, pulling her back from the abyss of memory. A message from Elena glowed across the screen. "Do you remember the night he climbed the fire escape in Armani? The one when you refused to return his calls? That was real, Sophia. Whatever he is now, that moment was real." Sophia's throat tightened. Elena had been there for everything, from the reckless beginning to the shattering present. She wanted to believe Elena's words, wanted to cling to the hope that some part of Adrian had truly loved her once. But doubt gnawed at her, sharper than any blade. She rose and crossed the room to her jewelry box. Beneath the velvet trays of diamonds and pearls, she lifted the false bottom and pulled out the folder. Photographs spilled across the bed. Adrian is entering hotels with Celeste. Adrian's text messages promising freedom to another woman. Adrian's casual dismissal of her devotion. She laid them out in sequence, a timeline of betrayal. Yet alongside those images burned another memory she could not extinguish, no matter how hard she tried. Adrian loosened his tie at a crowded gala, their secret signal that he wanted to leave. She touched her earring in return, their code for "I love you." They had lived entire conversations in glances and gestures, a language no one else understood. She picked up one photograph, Adrian holding Celeste's hand as they entered the Ritz. His face was unreadable, professional, distant, but Sophia searched for something else, anything else in his expression. Was it possible that even now, beneath the lies, he still carried fragments of what they once shared? The question tormented her. The door creaked, and Mrs. Ellison peeked in, her expression hesitant. "Dinner is ready, ma'am. Will Mr. Blackwell be joining?" Sophia forced a smile. "No, Mrs. Ellison, he has other obligations." The older woman hesitated before nodding. "Very well. Shall I serve yours in the dining room?" "In here, please," Sophia replied softly. The dining room was cavernous, echoing, a place of performances rather than meals. She could not bear the emptiness tonight. As Mrs. Ellison left, Sophia stared again at the spread of photographs. The woman she had been in those memories, the laughing scholar, the radiant bride, the woman who believed in love over dynasties, was gone. In her place stood someone new, forged in betrayal, sharpened by cruelty. The whispers of the past haunted her, but they also fueled her. Adrian had forgotten that he had not married a fragile ornament. He had married a strategist, a woman capable of playing his game. He thought she was blind, but she saw everything. He thought she was weak, but stronger than he could imagine. Sophia gathered the photographs, returning them to their hidden place. Her reflection caught her eye in the mirror as she closed the box. Her eyes were steady now, hard with resolve. The past had been filled with fire, passion and promises. The present was filled with betrayal, but the future, that was hers to shape. Adrian Blackwell thought he was the master of this game. Soon, he would learn the truth. The queen always moves last. When she does, she changes everything. The whispers of the past were fading, replaced by the roar of what was coming. And Sophia was ready. The Carlton Hotel Cafe was alive with morning chatter, silver spoons clinking against porcelain cups, businessmen murmuring over contracts, and women in designer suits typing furiously into sleek laptops. To Sophia, however, the room felt suspended in time, as if the very air held its breath while she waited for Elena to arrive. Her best friend had texted her the night before with an urgency Sophia could not ignore. "Come early, alone. We need to talk about Adrian." When Elena swept through the revolving doors, she carried a sharp energy that cut through the cafe's elegance. Her hazel eyes scanned the room before locking on to Sophia. She was dressed impeccably, a navy blazer tailored to perfection, her hair pulled back in a sleek knot that only emphasized the determination etched into her features. Sophia rose to greet her, and their embrace was more than routine, survival. Elena had been with her through everything, from long nights of study during their university years to the dizzying whirl of Adrian's courtship. She had watched Sophia fall, and now she was watching her unravel. "You look tired," Elena said softly as they sat. Sophia gave a small, humorless laugh. 9 months of sleeping in an empty bed will do that to a person. The waiter arrived, and they ordered coffee and croissants, neither of which they would truly touch. The pretense of civility masked the storm waiting beneath. Elena leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Sophia, I've kept something from you. I didn't want to hurt you, but you need to know." Sophia braced herself, her nails digging into the linen tablecloth beneath her hands. "Tell me." "It's about Adrian's first wife," Elena said, her words precise. "Vivian Russo Blackwell, the woman everyone believes left him for a banker in Switzerland." Sophia's brow furrowed. Adrian had spoken of Vivian only once, painting her as the betrayer who had shattered his trust. The narrative seemed too convenient, but Sophia had been too wrapped in her love to question it then. "She didn't leave him for another man," Elena continued. "She left because she caught him with someone else. Someone close to the family. It caused a scandal. They buried it with a massive settlement to buy her silence." Sophia's chest tightened, the cafe around her blurring into background noise. "Who told you this?" "Vivian's sister," Elena said firmly. "At a charity gala, after too much champagne. She had no reason to lie." The revelation landed like a hammer blow. Adrian's betrayal and abandonment story is a carefully constructed fiction. He had worn his pain like a shield, convincing Sophia that he was a wounded man who needed saving. But the truth? He had been the betrayer, not the betrayed. Sophia closed her eyes, memories crashing into her with cruel clarity. His declarations of devotion, his insistence that she was different, his whispered confessions that he had never loved anyone the way he loved her, they had all been framed by a lie. She was not the first. She was not even unique. She was simply the next. When she opened her eyes again, Elena was watching her carefully. "I'm telling you this because you deserve to know the kind of man you're dealing with. Adrian doesn't play fair. He never has." Sophia straightened, her spine rigid with resolve. "I suspected the affair with Celeste. I knew about the late nights, the perfume, the lipstick, but this is a pattern. This is who he is." Elena reached across the table, her hand warm against Sophia's cold fingers. "Then you can't fight him alone. He's too powerful, too practiced. But if you let me help, if you trust me, we can make sure he doesn't destroy you." Sophia studied her friend's face, searching for any hint of doubt. But Elena's eyes burned with loyalty and something more, fury. She had watched her best friend be diminished, humiliated, and manipulated. And now she wanted retribution as much as Sophia did. "You're certain about Vivienne?" Sophia asked finally. "I would stake my life on it," Elena said. Their coffees arrived, steaming and untouched. Sophia stared into the dark liquid, her mind already racing ahead. If Adrian had orchestrated Vivian's downfall, then her suspicions were not paranoia but prophecy. He was preparing the same strategy, only this time with higher stakes. He needed an heir, and she was the chosen vessel. Sophia's voice was steady when she spoke again. Then it's not enough to expose the affair. I need to understand the full scope of his plan. I need to know what he wants beyond Celeste, beyond humiliating me. Elena nodded. Then you'll need allies, and you'll need evidence that no one can deny. Sophia thought of the manila folder hidden in her jewelry box, of the photographs and messages she had already gathered. But those were only fragments of a larger puzzle. She needed the whole picture. Elena, she said slowly, do you think Vivian would talk to me? Her friend hesitated, her expression shifting. I don't know. She vanished after the divorce. But if she's still alive and carrying the scars, maybe she'd be willing to help you. Sophia's pulse quickened. The idea of confronting Adrian's first wife terrified her, but filled her with a strange sense of hope. If anyone understood the battlefield she stood upon, it would be Vivian Russo Blackwell. The waiter returned to refill their cups, and for a moment, the ordinary bustle of the cafe pressed back against their conspiratorial bubble. But when he left, Sophia leaned closer, her voice low and fierce. Adrian thinks he is playing chess while I am playing checkers. But he has forgotten something. Queens control the board, and I intend to remind him. Elena smiled, sharp as glass. Then let's make sure the game ends on your terms. They lingered only long enough to avoid suspicion, leaving cash on the table before entering the bright morning sun. Outside, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the war quietly brewing within its most powerful family. As they walked, Elena's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression hardening. It's from a source I trust. Adrian's been meeting with Bernard, the family lawyer. They're drafting contingency documents. Sophia's stomach twisted. For what? Divorce proceedings, Elena answered grimly, but with a clause that strips you of everything if there's proof of infidelity. Sophia stopped in her tracks, the words slicing through her composure. Infidelity, of course. It was the same trick he had used on Vivian, the same trap he was building now, brick by brick, around her. Elena, she whispered, her throat tight. They're going to frame me. Elena gripped her arm, steadying her. Then we'll frame them first. We'll expose everything before they can move. But you have to be careful, Sophia. One wrong step, and they'll bury you. Sophia nodded slowly, her mind sharpening like a blade. The betrayal was deeper than she had imagined, the stakes higher than she had feared. But she was no longer afraid. She had allies now, and she had truth. As she climbed into the waiting car, her reflection caught her eye in the tinted glass. She saw not the woman who had been abandoned in her own marriage, but a strategist, a survivor, a queen preparing for battle. Adrian Blackwell had thought his first wife was the only casualty of his ambition. He was wrong. This time, the woman he underestimated would be the one to end his game. And as the car pulled away from the Carlton, Sophia whispered to herself, "You taught me how to love, Adrian. Now you'll teach me how to win." The long dining hall of the Blackwell estate had been designed to intimidate. Chandeliers dripped with crystal above a table that could seat 30. Polished oak gleamed beneath the weight of sterling silver cutlery, and oil paintings of long-dead patriarchs lined the walls, each one silently judging. The hall glowed with the warm light of candles tonight, but the glow could not disguise the ice that permeated the air. Sophia walked in on Adrian's arm, though the gesture was more form than affection. His grip was tight enough to bruise, not because of tenderness but because of control. She kept her chin high, her black satin gown catching the light with every step. She knew the importance of appearances. In this family, perception was everything, and she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her falter. At the head of the table sat Genevieve Blackwell, Adrian's mother, dressed in pearls and power. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her eyes sharp as knives, her smile polite but merciless. Beside her was Bernard, the family lawyer with his ever-present briefcase that seemed to carry salvation and damnation. To Genevieve's left sat Celeste Marin, the new head of acquisitions, dressed in scarlet that clung to her body with deliberate provocation. The scent of her perfume floated across the room like a weapon. "Darling," Genevieve said as Sophia approached, her tone laced with ice wrapped in silk. "How wonderful of you to join us. We were beginning to think you had lost your way." "I live here, Genevieve," Sophia replied, lowering herself into the chair opposite. "It would be difficult to get lost in my own home." A few relatives shifted uncomfortably at her boldness. Genevieve's smile never wavered. Humor, how quaint. Dinner began, the cutlery clatter and the forced conversation murmur echoing in the cavernous room. Sophia's appetite had fled when she saw Celeste's smirk, but she lifted her glass, pretending to sip, her mind on guard for the ambush she knew was coming. It arrived halfway through the second course. Genevieve deliberately placed her fork down and turned her gaze on Sophia. "It has been over a year since the wedding. The Blackwell board grows restless. Investors prefer stability, and stability means succession." Sophia set her knife down slowly, every movement deliberate. "How fascinating. And what does succession have to do with me?" Celeste leaned forward, her painted lips curving into a smile. "It means the family requires an heir." "It is time, Sophia." The words struck like a gavel, final and commanding. Sophia let silence stretch before replying. "And if I refuse?" Bernard cleared his throat, opening the briefcase with a flourish. "The prenuptial agreement is explicit. Failure to produce an heir within 2 years constitutes grounds for annulment with limited compensation." Sophia's laugh was soft but cutting. "So I am livestock now, my worth measured in wombs and timelines." Genevieve's eyes hardened. "You knew what this marriage entailed. A Blackwell wife has responsibilities." Sophia's gaze flicked to Adrian, who sat rigid beside her, his face unreadable. "And does Adrian share these responsibilities? Or is the burden entirely mine?" Celeste's smirk widened. "Some responsibilities cannot be outsourced, Sophia. Surely you understand." Sophia turned her gaze on her rival, her voice low and sharp. "Tell me, Celeste, how many shareholder meetings require overnight stays at the Ritz? How many mergers demand lipstick stains and perfume?" The room froze. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Bernard cleared his throat again, nervous. "Perhaps we should focus on the matter at hand." "No," Sophia said firmly, rising slightly in her chair. "Let us be honest for once. The matter at hand is this. You want me to give this family an heir. You want me to secure your legacy with my body while my husband parades his mistress through society. And if I refuse, you plan to fabricate evidence and discard me like waste." Gasps rippled through the table. Genevieve's mask cracked for a moment before she smoothed it back into icy control. "No one is fabricating anything. We are simply clarifying terms." Sophia leaned forward, her voice calm but searing. "Then allow me to clarify mine. If you want your heir, you will accept my conditions." Adrian finally looked at her, shock flickering in his eyes. "Conditions?" "Yes," Sophia said, steady as steel. "First, we attend counseling, weekly, with a therapist of my choosing. Second, Adrian moves back into our bedroom. If you want a child, you will at least pretend to be a husband. Third, Celeste is no longer welcome at family dinners or private gatherings. She is a business associate, nothing more." Celeste's smile faltered, her eyes flashing with rage. "You cannot dictate terms." "I can," Sophia countered, "and I will. Finally, if there is a child, that child will carry both names. Blackwell Devereaux, non-negotiable." Genevieve slammed her hand against the table, echoing like a gunshot. "Absolutely not. No Blackwell heir has ever borne another name." "Then you will not have a Blackwell heir at all," Sophia said calmly, rising to her feet. "The choice is yours." Adrian's face twisted with conflict, torn between his mother's fury and his wife's defiance. Genevieve's eyes blazed, her voice low with venom. "Do you think you can threaten me, child?" Sophia's smile was cold, almost serene. "Not threaten, promise. I have evidence, Genevieve, evidence that would shatter your empire and your reputation in a single headline. Test me, and I will use it." The room erupted into chaos, voices clashing, chairs scraping, Celeste hissing like a cornered viper. Adrian rose, trying to regain control. But Sophia had already turned, her gown sweeping behind her as she strode toward the door. At the threshold, she paused, her voice carrying over the uproar. "Bernard, draw up the papers. Adrian, you have 24 hours to decide. Accept my terms or prepare for war." She left them in stunned silence, the echo of her heels on the marble floor declaring independence. Upstairs, in her bedroom, Sophia locked the door behind her and collapsed into the chair by the window. Her hands trembled, but her resolve was unshakable. She had just declared open rebellion against the most powerful family in the city. She had dared to defy Genevieve Blackwell on her own battlefield. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Elena glowed on the screen. How did it go? Sophia typed back 2 words. "The war has begun." She set the phone aside and stared out the window at the gardens where Adrian had once promised her eternity. The air outside was still, but she could feel the storm gathering. Tonight had not broken her. Tonight had forged her. The family thought they had trapped her, cornered her into submission, but what they had truly done was awaken her. And Sophia Devereaux Blackwell was no longer playing for survival. She was playing for victory. The mansion was silent when Sophia returned to her wing. Even the house staff had learned to retreat early, leaving the corridors hollow, echoing only with the faint ticking of grandfather clocks and the occasional groan of ancient wood. She closed her door and leaned against it, her breath trembling, her hands still shaking from the firestorm she had unleashed at dinner. Her conditions had landed like a dagger on the table, slicing through centuries of Blackwell tradition. She had not waited for their response. She knew it would come, sharp and calculated, but tonight she needed to prepare. She crossed the room to her vanity, her reflection catching her eye. A woman stared back, elegant in her black satin gown, diamonds glittering against her collarbone, her hair an immaculate crown of dark waves. But her eyes burned with something Genevieve had never anticipated. Not desperation, not fear, calculation. With deliberate calm, Sophia reached for her jewelry box, a heavy mahogany chest lined with velvet. She unlocked the clasp and lifted the top tray, filled with glittering heirlooms Adrian had once showered upon her. Baubles meant to dazzle and distract. She set the tray aside, revealing a false bottom only she knew existed. Her fingers slipped beneath the hidden panel and lifted it, exposing the manila folder nestled in the dark. The folder was thick, overstuffed with weeks of careful collection. She laid it on the vanity and opened it, the pages whispering like conspirators in the candlelight. Photographs slid free first, glossy prints of Adrian entering and leaving the Ritz with Celeste at his side. Different nights, disguises, a baseball cap, sometimes sunglasses, but always together. The timestamps aligned with board meetings he had claimed to attend. His arrogance had been his undoing. He never varied his pattern, believing himself untouchable. Next came the phone records, screenshots of text messages retrieved from his carelessly logged-in laptop. "My darling Celeste will be free for a few more months. Sophia will never see it coming." One message glared at her like fire. Pathetically devoted. That was how Adrian had described her. She traced the letters with a fingertip, the humiliation burning anew. But behind it smoldered rage that had crystallized into strategy. There were receipts, jewelry purchased but never received, dinners at exclusive restaurants, and hotel stays billed discreetly under company accounts. Adrian had left a breadcrumb trail of betrayal, and Sophia followed it, piece by piece, until she could see the whole design. At the back of the folder lay the crown jewel, copies of confidential company documents she had managed to photograph late at night when Adrian left his laptop unattended. Notes between him and Bernard, outlining contingency clauses, inheritance strategies, and coded references to securing an heir before dissolving the marriage. They had not even bothered to use euphemisms. Her body was a clause, her child a pawn, her marriage a contract to be voided when convenient. Sophia closed her eyes, letting the fury steady into resolve. This was not simply about an affair. It was an orchestration, a strategy honed through years of practice. Elena's revelation about Vivian had already proven this was not the first time. Now, with evidence in her hands, Sophia knew it would not be the last. Unless she stopped him. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting her back to the present. She picked it up. A message from Elena. "I have something for you. Not safe to send over text. Meet me tomorrow, same cafe, urgent." Sophia typed back one word, "Yes." She returned the folder to its hiding place, securing the false bottom again. But even as she locked the jewelry box, her heart thudded with the knowledge that secrets could only stay hidden so long. The Blackwell estate was a fortress, but fortresses had spies, and she could not risk discovery. She turned off the lights and slipped beneath the silk sheets, the folder's weight pressing against her thoughts even in concealment. Sleep did not come easily. She drifted in fragments, haunted by memories of the man Adrian had once pretended to be, the man who had kissed her knuckles under starlight, who had whispered poetry against her skin, who had sworn she was the salvation he never deserved. Had that man ever existed, or had it all been performance? She did not know. But she knew who he was now. The next morning she rose early, dressing in a simple but striking navy sheath. She needed armor, not glamour. The drive to the cafe passed silently, the city rushing past like a blur of steel and glass. When she arrived, Elena was already waiting, her face pale but determined. Sophia slid into the seat across from her, signaling the waiter for coffee. "What is it?" she asked. Elena glanced around the cafe, lowering her voice. "I spoke to someone who used to work for the Blackwell's legal team, off the record. He said Adrian has been preparing for months, not just divorce. He's planning to claim infidelity on your part." Sophia's jaw tightened. "I know. I found the drafts." Elena's eyes darkened. "It's worse. They've hired someone, an actor. His job is to be seen with you, photographed near you, and create the illusion of an affair. His name is David Chen." The name sent a chill through Sophia. "So they'll stage it. Manufactured betrayal." Elena nodded grimly. "Exactly. And when they present the evidence, you'll be ruined. No settlement, no inheritance, nothing." Sophia leaned back, exhaling slowly. The trap was tightening, but knowledge was power. "Then I'll turn their weapon against them," she murmured. Elena frowned. "What do you mean?" Sophia's gaze hardened. "If they want to use David Chen, I'll find him first. I'll uncover the contract, expose the fabrication, and show the world who Adrian truly is." The plan settled into her bones like iron. For too long, she had been reacting to Adrian's moves. Now she would strike first. That afternoon, she returned to the mansion, her mind alight with possibilities. She avoided Adrian, who had cloistered himself in the study with Bernard, their voices carrying through the heavy door in clipped, conspiratorial tones. Instead, she went straight to her room and opened the jewelry box again. The folder felt heavier now. Its contents were no longer just evidence of betrayal, but weapons of war. She spread the photographs across the bed, arranging them like a chessboard. Each image was a piece, each receipt a strategy, each text message a move. Adrian thought he was the player, but he had underestimated the queen. She was not a pawn to be sacrificed. She was the one who would decide the endgame. Hours passed as she cataloged, cross-referenced, and mapped every thread. When the grandfather clock struck 6, she realized she had missed lunch, tea, and the household's hollow rituals. She did not care. Tonight, the game had shifted. As dusk fell over the estate, Sophia packed the folder into a slim leather case and placed it in her closet safe, locking it with a code only she knew. She slipped the key into a chain around her neck, hidden beneath her blouse. If Adrian suspected anything, she would deny, deflect, disarm. But inside, she knew the truth. She held the future of the Blackwell Empire in her hands, and soon she would decide its fate. Standing at the window, she watched the lights flicker in the gardens below. Adrian was plotting her downfall somewhere in the distance, believing himself invincible. But tonight, Sophia whispered to the glass, "The queen is awake." And when the queen awakens, the king learns fear. The rain had fallen since dawn, a steady curtain that blurred the city into muted grays and silvers. Sophia sat in the corner of the quiet cafe, her navy coat draped around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the door. She had been told he would come, though she still half expected the message to be a trap. Every sound of the door opening sent anticipation down her spine. Finally, at 9:10, he appeared. David Chen. He did not look like the villain she had imagined, nor the lover they planned to paint him as. He looked ordinary, dark hair damp from the rain, a leather jacket that had seen better days, a face both boyish and worn. He paused at the threshold, scanning the room until his gaze landed on her. For a heartbeat, he hesitated, then approached, his steps careful, deliberate. Sophia watched him closely as he slid into the chair across from her. He avoided her eyes at first, reaching into his satchel with trembling hands. When he finally looked up, guilt swam in his gaze like a confession already forming. "You must be Sophia Blackwell," he said, his voice low. "And you must be the man hired to ruin me," Sophia replied, her tone sharp but calm. He winced. "That's why I asked to meet. I can't do it anymore." He pulled a thick envelope from the satchel and pushed it across the table. Sophia eyed it but had not reached for it yet. "What is this?" "Everything," David said. "The contract I signed, the photos they wanted staged, the emails, the timeline for our supposed affair. It's all there." Sophia leaned back, folding her arms. "Why give this to me? What do you gain by betraying them?" David's shoulders slumped, his voice tinged with shame. "When they hired me, they told me you were nothing. A gold digger, a parasite that trapped Adrian. They said I'd be helping justice, but then I did my own research. I saw your dissertation, your work in emerging markets, your charity foundation. You're not what they said. You're not the villain in this story. I couldn't play my part anymore." Sophia studied him, searching for deception. He looked sincere, almost desperate to unburden himself. "How much did they pay you?" "50,000, he admitted, sliding his phone across the table. "But I already returned it. The transfer is there. I want no part of this." At last, Sophia picked up the envelope, opening it slowly. Inside were glossy prints of photographs, herself but altered. Digitally manipulated images of her and David walking hand in hand, kissing on a park bench, and entering hotels. The forgeries were convincing, chillingly so. There were also typed notes, scripts of supposed text messages, and fake love letters in handwriting designed to mimic hers. Every piece was crafted to destroy her reputation. Her stomach tightened, but outwardly, she remained composed. She looked up, her voice even. "You were supposed to become my shadow. To make the world believe I had betrayed my husband," David nodded miserably. "They told me to be seen with you, to sit near you at the gym, to bump into you at the grocery. Store enough times to spark whispers, then photographs to seal the lie." Sophia closed the folder, her fingers steady, though her heart thundered. "And you expect me to believe you've suddenly changed your conscience?" David leaned forward, his voice raw. "My mother went through this. Not with the Blackwells, but with another family like them. They treated her like property, forced her into a marriage for money, and discarded her when she couldn't give them what they wanted. I watched it break her. When I realized I was about to do the same thing to you, I couldn't." Sophia held his gaze, silence stretching between them. Rain tapped against the windows like a ticking clock. Finally, she nodded once. "Then you've done the right thing. But you said in your message there was something more." David hesitated, then reached into his satchel again, producing another folder. He opened it and spread out headshots, casting photos, audition notes, resumes. One in particular caught Sophia's breath. Celeste Marin. Only the name beneath the photo wasn't Celeste. It read Celine Martel. Sophia's pulse quickened. The woman in the headshot was unmistakably the same. Younger, hungrier, eyes sharp with ambition, but lacking the polish of the executive she now portrayed. "Who is she?" Sophia demanded. David's mouth tightened. "An actress."
Canadian. Failed auditions, bit parts in commercials, nothing significant. Then, about 2 years ago, she disappeared from casting lists. And suddenly she resurfaces here as Celeste Marin, MBA from Wharton, daughter of Robert Marin, new head of acquisitions. Except none of that is real. Marin International has no daughter. I checked. Robert Marin has 3 sons, all accounted for. They've never heard of Celeste. The world tilted for Sophia, the threads of betrayal weaving into something larger than she had imagined. Celeste wasn't merely a mistress, she was an invention. "Someone built her," Sophia whispered. David nodded, and whoever did it had resources. They erased Celine Martel and created Celeste Marin, a forged identity, fabricated degrees, fabricated history. She's been playing a role written by someone very powerful. Sophia pressed her palms flat against the table, her mind racing. Adrian's arrogance, his need to prove himself, and his hunger for validation had made him the perfect mark. He had fallen for a performance, and Genevieve had welcomed Celeste, perhaps unknowingly, into their world. "Do you know who hired her?" Sophia asked. David shook his head. "The trail vanishes into shell companies. Payments are routed through offshore accounts. But one thing is clear, this wasn't just an affair. It was a setup, and you were always meant to be collateral damage." Sophia sat back, the weight of revelation crashing over her. For months, she had believed she was battling Adrian's infidelity, Genevieve's manipulations, the cruelty of a husband who saw her as a pawn. But this was deeper. There was another player at the table who had written the script of her destruction before she had even seen the stage. She closed the folder and met David's eyes. "You've done more than enough. But now you need to disappear. If they find out you've betrayed them, your life won't be safe." David looked relieved, though fear flickered at the edges of his expression. "I was hoping you'd say that. I have a cousin upstate. I'll stay with him for a while. But Sophia, be careful. If someone can invent an entire person, they can erase anyone. Even you." She stood, slipping both folders into her bag, her voice cold with resolve. "They won't erase me. They'll regret ever trying." As she stepped out into the rain, the city seemed different. No longer just a backdrop to her marriage's collapse, but a battlefield where unseen forces plotted her downfall. The storm soaked her hair and dress, but she welcomed it. It felt cleansing, sharpening. She walked to her car with the certainty that she now held weapons more dangerous than Adrian or Genevieve had imagined. When she reached the mansion, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. She entered through the side door, moving quickly to her room, locking the door behind her. She laid the folders on the bed, spreading the evidence like a general preparing for war. Celeste Marin was Celine Martel, an actress, a fabrication. And if that were true, then the so-called merger between Blackwell and Marin International was nothing more than smoke and mirrors. The empire Adrian thought he was securing was a mirage. Sophia felt a surge of power, cold and electric. She had thought she was fighting to survive and hold on to dignity scraps, but now she saw the truth. She was fighting for the truth and the chance to expose a deception far beyond her marriage. The clock struck midnight, echoing through the silent halls. She gathered the folders, returned them to the hidden compartment, and sat by the window, staring out into the darkness. She whispered to herself the words both promise and prophecy. "You thought I was your pawn, but I am the queen, and the queen does not fall." In the distance, thunder rolled, low and ominous. The storm was far from over. It was only the beginning. The morning broke heavy and gray, the kind of sky that seemed to mirror Sophia's thoughts. The rain from the night before had left the streets slick, and the mansion was cloaked in a hush that felt almost unnatural. She was in the library when the call came. At first, she thought she had misheard the trembling voice on the other end. Adrian had collapsed in the middle of a board meeting, rushed to the hospital by ambulance, his condition uncertain. Sophia set down the leather-bound volume in her hand, her fingers numb. For a moment, she simply stood there,
listening to the echo of her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. Then she moved, swift and precise. Coat, handbag, car keys. Within minutes, she was speeding through the city streets, the world outside her windshield a blur. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion, the air heavy with tension. She found Lawrence waiting in the corridor, his face drawn, his tie loosened. He looked up as she approached, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of worry and calculation. He collapsed when they began questioning the merger, Lawrence said, his voice clipped. The directors are furious. Stocks are tumbling, and Adrian, he's lying in there like a broken man. Sophia glanced toward the closed door, her chest tightening. For all her anger and planning, the image of Adrian crumpled on the boardroom floor unsettled her. He had been her tormentor, her betrayer, yet also the man who once stood in the rain declaring she was his salvation. "Can I see him?" she asked. Lawrence hesitated, then nodded. "He's been asking for you." She entered the room quietly. Adrian lay pale against the hospital sheets, his skin almost ashen, wires and monitors tethering him like chains. His eyes fluttered open when he heard her footsteps. There was no steel in them for the first time in months, only fragility. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice raspy, stripped of arrogance. She moved closer, pulling a chair to his bedside. "I'm here." He tried to lift his hand, but it trembled. She took it without hesitation, though the gesture felt strange after so long. "I know," he began, swallowing hard. "I know about Celeste. Lorenz told me. She was never who I thought she was." Sophia said nothing, waiting. "I threw it all away for a lie," Adrian murmured, his eyes glistening. "I threw you away." Her chest tightened, but she kept her tone measured. "You chose ambition over love. You chose her over me." His gaze shifted, pained. "No, I chose fear. 6 months ago, my mother told me something about my father. She said he didn't die from overwork, like everyone believes. He died in the bed of his mistress. He was 47, she was 23. Mother covered it up, paid her off, and buried the scandal. But she told me I was just like him, weak, led by desire instead of duty." Sophia froze. The words fit like jagged pieces of a puzzle she had never been able to solve. Adrian's sudden withdrawal, the coldness, the obsession with appearances, had all begun around that time. "She said falling in love with you was proof I'd inherited his weakness," Adrian continued, tears streaking down his temples. "So I tried to prove her wrong. I tried to kill the part of me that needed you. I thought if I could bury my love, I could bury my weakness. But I only proved her right. I destroyed myself, and you." Sophia's hands tightened around his. For a moment, she saw not the calculating air, not the cold betrayer, but the man who had whispered to her in the dark, counted the days since their first meeting, and flew her to Paris simply to show her the Mona Lisa. Vulnerable, human, broken. "And Celeste?" she asked softly. Adrian let out a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. "She was a fantasy, a performance. I couldn't even touch her without thinking of you. 3 days at the hotel, Sophia, and nothing happened. I couldn't. My body betrayed me, my heart betrayed me. All I could think about was the woman I'd abandoned. You." Sophia sat back, her mind swirling. Could she believe him, or was this another mask, carefully crafted role designed to draw her back in? "I want to end it," Adrian said, his eyes pleading. "Not with you, with all of it, with Mother, with the company, with the lies. I want to divorce them, to walk away. Let Lawrence have the empire. I just want you. If you'll let me try to earn you back." Before Sophia could respond, the door burst open. Celeste Celine Martel stormed in, her perfect facade cracked, her eyes wild. "You ruined everything," she spat, her gaze fixed on Sophia. 2 years I played this role. 2 years of smiling at that pathetic man's boardroom speeches and Genevieve's condescension. And you," her finger jabbed at Sophia, "you've survived it all. You were supposed to be broken by now." Sophia rose slowly, her expression calm, though her pulse raced. "Why, Celine? Who are you really?" Celeste laughed bitterly. "You really don't know? Vivienne, your beloved husband's first wife. She hired me, paid me $500,000 to destroy him from the inside, to fake the merger, seduce him, dragged the Blackwells into ruin. The room stilled. Adrian's breath hitched, his monitor beeping faster. "Vivian," Sophia repeated. "But why involve me?" "You were collateral," Celeste sneered. "Another woman swallowed by this cursed family. Vivian wanted revenge, and I wanted money. It was perfect." Adrian's face contorted in pain. "She poisoned me," he whispered. "The coffee." "You said you stopped drinking it, Sophia. You knew." Sophia nodded grimly. "I suspected. Something was wrong. But I didn't know it was her." Celeste's laugh was jagged. "Oh, it wasn't just me. Vivian has friends everywhere, even in this hospital, even in your own house."
"Do you think you're safe?" "None of you is safe." Before security could arrive, she turned and swept out, her heels clicking like gunshots in the hallway. Sophia stood frozen, her mind racing. Vivian, the quiet, silenced wife who had disappeared into Switzerland, was the true architect. Celeste had been only a pawn. Adrian squeezed her hand weakly, his eyes filled with terror and regret. "What will you do?" Sophia straightened, her voice steel. "End this. All of it. The games, the revenge, the manipulation. It ends now." At that moment, her phone buzzed in her pocket. An unknown international number. She answered cautiously. "Hello, Sophia," came a woman's voice, smooth and deliberate. "This is Vivienne Rousseau. I think it's time we met. Woman to woman. Survivor to survivor." Sophia's breath caught. "Where?" "The Carlton Hotel. Presidential suite. Come alone. Bring the prenuptial agreement. There is something in the appendix Y that our husband never noticed." Page 247, subsection 3A. You'll want to see it.
The line went dead. Sophia slipped the phone back into her pocket, her hands trembling. She turned to see Lawrence in the doorway, his eyes searching hers, silently asking what she had just learned. She looked back at Adrian, pale and broken in the hospital bed, then at Lawrence, then at the rain streaking down the window. The board, the empire, the lies, Vivian's revenge, it all converged on her shoulders now. "I'll go," she whispered, more to herself than them, and for the first time, she realized the war was no longer between a husband and wife, or between a family and its enemies. It was a war for survival, truth, and the chance to break the cycle that had destroyed many lives. Sophia Blackwell would step into the lion's den, not as a victim, but as a player who had finally seen the whole board.
The Carlton Hotel gleamed like a monument to wealth, its marble columns and crystal chandeliers a world apart from the storm Sophia carried inside. She stepped out of the black car and adjusted her coat, her mind replaying Vivian's voice. Page 247, subsection 3A, something hidden in the prenuptial agreement, something Adrian had never noticed. The presidential suite was on the 23rd floor, the elevator ride long enough for doubts to creep in. What if it was a trap? What if Vivian planned to finish what Celeste had started? Yet Sophia's resolve held. She had faced Genevieve's cruelty, Adrian's betrayal, and Celeste's fabricated identity. She would face this too. The door opened before she could knock. Vivienne Rousseau stood framed in the light, elegance sharpened into something colder. Time had not dimmed her beauty, but it had carved steel into her posture, her gaze. She wore black, her jewelry understated, her smile enigmatic. "Sophia Blackwell," Vivian said softly. "At last." Sophia entered, every sense alert. The suite was immaculate, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the tall windows. Vivian gestured toward a small table where 2 glasses of wine waited. "I do not drink with enemies," Sophia said, her voice measured. "Then think of me as an ally," Vivian replied. "For now." Sophia sat but did not touch the glass. "You hired Celine. You paid her to play Celeste Marin. Why?" Vivian's lips curved, not into a smile but into the shadow of one. "Because destruction is the only language the Blackwell dynasty understands. They destroyed me, so I returned the favor." "You left," Sophia countered. "Everyone said you left him for another man." Vivian laughed, low and bitter. "A story Genevieve bought with blood money. No, Sophia,
I left because Adrian betrayed me, not with another woman at first, but with his mother's lies, with the family's endless demands. And when I found the courage to expose the truth, they silenced me. Do you know what it feels like to be erased? Sophia's jaw tightened. Yes. For a moment silence stretched, the weight of shared suffering heavy between them. Then Vivian slid a leather-bound folder across the table. Your prenup. I kept a copy. I read every page. Did you? Sophia opened it, flipping to page 247, subsection 3A. Her eyes scanned the words, her breath catching as the meaning crystallized. If the husband is deemed mentally incompetent or physically incapacitated for a period exceeding 30 days, control of all marital assets and corporate holdings shall be transferred to the wife. Sophia looked up sharply. He's already been hospitalized. His conditions are documented. Vivian's eyes gleamed. Exactly. Legally, you hold the reins now. Warren Industries, the trusts, the estates, yours. Genevieve thought she was safeguarding her empire, but she planted the seed of her own downfall. Sophia's heart pounded. Power lay before her like an open road, but it was not just power she saw. It was an escape, a chance to reshape everything, to protect herself and the child she carried. And you want what? She asked quietly. Vivian leaned back, her fingers tapping the stem of her glass. An alliance. I've spent years plotting their ruin, but I'm tired of vengeance. I want to build something. A consultancy, a sanctuary for women like us. Women chewed up and discarded by powerful men. With your intellect and my connections, we could reshape the battlefield. Sophia studied her. And Adrian? Vivian's expression hardened. Adrian is both victim and villain. He destroyed you because he thought it made him strong. He destroyed me for the same reason. Whether you save him or discard him is your choice. But never forget, he will always carry his mother's poison inside him. Sophia stood, pacing toward the window. The city shimmered, unaware of the wars waged in its towers. Why tell me this now? Why not let me burn with the rest of them? Vivian rose, her presence commanding. Because you remind me of myself before they broke me. And perhaps, if you win, it will mean I won too. Through you the words sank into Sophia like a challenge and a warning. Her phone buzzed, a message from Lawrence. Mother is gathering the board, tonight. She intends to remove you. Sophia pocketed the phone, turning back to Vivian. If I take this power, if I accept this clause, Genevieve will come after me harder than ever. Vivian's smile sharpened. Then let her. She has built her empire on manipulation and silence. You hold evidence, allies, and now the law itself. Use them. Sophia closed the folder, and her decision was formed. Very well, but I will not become you, Vivian. I will not let vengeance define me. Vivian's eyes softened, just slightly. See that you don't. As Sophia left the suite, she carried more than documents. She carried a blueprint for victory. Yet doubt gnawed at her. Could she wield this power without becoming the very monster she despised? The next day, the Warren estate was a cauldron of whispers. Genevieve had summoned the board, her intent clear. Strip Sophia of influence, solidify control. Sophia entered the great hall calmly, though her veins burned with fire. Adrian remained in the hospital, fragile, absent. Lawrence waited at her side, his expression unreadable. Genevieve rose at the head of the table, dressed in her signature Chanel, her voice as cold as ever. This marriage has failed its purpose. No heir, no stability. The board requires decisive action. Sophia placed the folder on the table, opening it to the fateful clause. Then perhaps you should read the contract your son signed. Page 247. The room stirred as Bernard, the family lawyer, adjusted his glasses and read aloud. His voice faltered as the truth emerged. Sophia's authority was ironclad. You are incapacitated, Adrian, Sophia said softly, though he was absent, and the law provides for continuity. Through me, Genevieve's composure cracked for the first time in memory. This is impossible. It is legal, Bernard confirmed reluctantly. She holds the authority. The board erupted in murmurs, some with relief, others with fear. Lawrence leaned close to Sophia, his whisper sharp. You've done it.
But now you must lead." Sophia raised her chin, her voice clear above the chaos. "From this moment, Warren Industries is no longer a throne for tyrants. It is a company that will answer to its people, not to the whims of one family." The declaration rippled through the room like thunder. Genevieve's eyes blazed with hatred. "You think you've won, but power will consume you just as it consumed me." Sophia met her gaze, steady. "The difference is, I do not fear losing power. I fear losing myself, and that is something you never understood." The meeting ended in upheaval, the board reluctantly shifting to her side. Sophia walked out into the night, the rain finally clearing, the air fresh and sharp. Yet as she drove back to the hospital, her heart twisted. Adrian lay waiting, broken, his empire slipping from his grasp. Would he see her as a savior or an executioner? And did it matter? She paused outside his room, her hand on the door. Inside was a man who had betrayed her, who had loved her once, who had been shaped by a cruel mother and a lie of a mistress. Could she still find humanity there? Or was he only another casualty of Vivian's revenge and Genevieve's ambition? Sophia entered quietly. Adrian's eyes opened, searching hers. Weak, hopeful, terrified. "What happened?" he whispered. Sophia sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on the folder. Everything changed. At that moment, she realized Vivian's revenge was no longer about the past. It was about what Sophia would choose to do next. The war was hers now, and every move from here would determine whether she became liberator or tyrant. The storm outside had passed, but another was just beginning within her. The Warren estate had seen countless gatherings over the years, but never one like this. The Great Hall, usually reserved for opulent dinners and calculated displays of wealth, had been transformed into a battlefield of words and strategy. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, papers spread across its surface like weapons waiting to be wielded. Sophia stood at the head of the table, her posture regal yet electric with resolve. She was no longer the quiet wife who had once hovered at the edges of conversations, smiling politely while others dictated her fate. Now she was the strategist, the architect, holding every fragile thread of this fractured family in her hands. Around her sat the unlikely coalition she had assembled, each face marked with scars from the war against Genevieve and Adrian's betrayal. Lawrence lounged to her left, his sharp eyes betraying little, though the twitch of his jaw revealed the tension coiled within him. Across from him sat Isabel, quiet yet watchful, her elegance no longer mere ornament, but a shield forged from survival. At the far end, Matthias toyed with his glass of water, restless, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he studied the documents before him. And then there was Celine, no longer the glamorous Celeste Meron, but stripped bare of her false identity. She sat nervously, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes darting face to face. She had been the weapon meant to destroy Sophia, yet now she was part of the council, her knowledge a key to dismantling Genevieve's empire. The door opened and Miranda entered, carrying a thick folder. She no longer looked like the obedient secretary who had once fetched coffee and quietly shadowed Adrian. Now she was every inch the attorney she had trained to be, her heels striking the floor with a rhythm of authority. She set the folder down before Sophia. "The evidence is airtight," Miranda said, her voice crisp. "Bank transfers, falsified contracts, shell corporations. Genevieve has been embezzling for years. If this goes public, she will lose her social standing and face criminal charges." A low murmur rippled across the table. Lawrence leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Then why are we even hesitating? We present this to the board, have her removed, and be done with her." Sophia shook her head. "If we move too soon, she will retaliate. She still has allies, and Robert Morrow is waiting in the wings, eager to exploit chaos. We need more than evidence. We need a plan that ensures her complete removal without leaving cracks for her to crawl back through." Matthias smirked, tapping his fingers against the table. "So you're not just aiming to defeat her, you want to erase her." Sophia met his gaze coolly. "I want to end the cycle." How many lives has she already destroyed? How many women were silenced, discarded, forced into exile? This does not end with a single victory. It ends when the system she built crumbles. Celine shifted uncomfortably, her voice tentative. "You speak like someone who has already decided who the enemy is. But remember, Vivian hired me. She wanted to destroy the Blackwells just as much as Genevieve. What makes you so sure she isn't still pulling the strings?" Sophia studied her carefully. "Because Vivian has already won in her own way. Genevieve is exposed. Adrian is broken. And I am no longer their pawn. Vivian doesn't need to destroy me. She needs me to finish what she started. But unlike her, I intend to rebuild when it's over." The room fell silent, her words hanging like a banner. Isabel broke it first, her voice steady. "Then we must think like her. If Genevieve taught us anything, it is that power lies not just in wealth but also in perception. We must control the narrative. Let the world see her as the manipulator, the fraud, the woman who destroyed her own family." Miranda nodded, sliding photographs across the table. "Here. Evidence of her meetings with Morrow's representatives. If these are leaked, it will appear she was plotting against her company, betraying its stability for personal gain. Investors will abandon her." Lawrence chuckled darkly. "Poetic. She taught us to fight with shadows, and now she will drown in them." Sophia's gaze flicked toward him. "This isn't about revenge, Lawrence. This is about survival. Remember that." Lawrence tilted his head, smirking. "For you, maybe. For me, it's about more than survival. It's about finally stepping out of Adrian's shadow." The tension between them thickened, but Sophia did not rise to it. Instead, she turned to Celine. "You said Genevieve confessed things to you, not realizing you were recording. Do you have those files?" Celine reached into her bag and produced a small recorder. 3 hours of conversation. She spoke freely, convinced I was her loyal protege. She admitted to withholding Adrian's father's medication, admitting to orchestrating arranged relationships, and even hinted at forcing Isabel into silence years ago. "It's all here." Isabel flinched, her hand tightening around her wineglass, but she said nothing. Sophia placed a gentle hand on hers, grounding her. "This is more than enough," Miranda said, "not only to strip her of power, but to ensure she never sets foot in the boardroom again." Sophia stood, her presence commanding. "Then it is settled. Tomorrow we convene the board. Genevieve will face her reckoning. But we must also prepare for Morrow. He will not stay idle once he realizes his pawn has failed." Matthias raised an eyebrow. "And what of Adrian? He is still in the hospital, and technically the heir. Where does he fit in all this?" Sophia hesitated, her mind heavy with conflict. Adrian had bared his wounds to her, confessed the poison his mother had poured into him, and begged for a chance to change. But could she trust him, or was he destined to repeat the sins of his bloodline? "He will have a choice," she said finally, "to stand with us or to fall with her." The War Council ended in the early morning hours, the group dispersing into the shadows of the estate. Sophia lingered alone at the table, her hand resting on the prenup that had become her sword and shield. She thought of Vivienne's warning, Genevieve's venom, and Adrian's broken confession. Power had fallen into her hands, but so had responsibility. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting long shadows that danced across the portraits of Blackwell patriarchs long dead. Sophia studied their painted faces, each a reminder of dynasties built on manipulation, greed, and cruelty. She would not be their echo. She would forge something new. As dawn broke, she stepped onto the terrace, the first rays of sunlight piercing the heavy sky. Below, the gardens stretched lush and endless, a testament to beauty surviving even in hostile soil. Behind her, Lawrence appeared, his voice low. "Do you trust them? Any of them?" Sophia did not turn. "Trust is a luxury I cannot afford, but I will use them as they will use me. The difference is I will not lie to myself about it."
Lawrence smirked. Spoken like Genevieve herself. Sophia turned then, her eyes sharp as glass. No, spoken like the woman who will end her reign. Lawrence studied her for a moment, then nodded. Very well. But remember, Sophia, victory changes people, even the strongest. She watched him walk away, his words heavy but unshakable. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps victory would change her. But if so, it would not be included in Genevieve. It would be into something Genevieve never understood. A woman who fought not to dominate, but to free herself from the chains of a dynasty built on ruin. The war council had ended, but the true battle was only beginning. And Sophia, for the first time, felt the full power of being not a pawn, not even a queen, but the player who had mastered the board. The boardroom of Blackwell Industries had always been a theater of polished deception. Polished wood, silver inlays, leather chairs that gleamed under recessed lighting. But on this morning, the illusion of perfection trembled. The air was heavy with tension, turning whispered breaths into thunderclaps. Sophia entered first, her heels echoing across the marble floor. Her presence silenced the murmurs instantly. She was dressed not in delicate silk, but in structured power. A tailored navy suit that proclaimed she was no longer a decorative wife. She walked with purpose, the prenup folder clutched in her hand like a blade. Behind her came Lawrence, calm and composed, his gaze sharp with calculation. Isabel followed, understated but resolute, a woman no longer willing to hide in her mother's shadow. Matthias strolled in last, casual on the surface, though his restless hands betrayed his anticipation. And then came Genevieve. She swept into the room like a storm in Chanel, her diamond brooch catching the light as though mocking those who dared oppose her. Bernard, the family's longtime attorney, stood at her side, his face unreadable. The board members whispered nervously. Investors sat rigid, sensing history about to tilt. "Let us begin," Genevieve said, her voice smooth yet steel-laced. "Scandal, whispers, and incompetence have destabilized this company. It is time for decisive action. Sophia Blackwell has failed to fulfill her duty as wife and protector of this family's legacy. I move to have her removed from all influence immediately." Gasps rippled through the room. Bernard nodded gravely, as though her words were carved in stone. But Sophia did not flinch. She placed the prenup folder on the table, sliding it across to Bernard. "Read," she commanded. Bernard adjusted his glasses and opened the document. The silence deepened as his voice recited the words from page 247, subsection 3A. Control of all marital assets and corporate holdings transferred to the wife in the event of the husband's incapacitation. The board members shifted, eyes darting between Bernard and Genevieve. The empress of the family empire had been checkmated by her own legal fortress. "That clause is obsolete," Genevieve snapped, rising from her chair. "It was never meant to be exercised." "It exists," Sophia replied coolly, "and it has been triggered. Adrian is incapacitated, his hospital records irrefutable. This means that, by law, the reins are mine, not yours." The room exploded with murmurs, questions, and panic. "Order," Bernard barked, though his own hands trembled. "The clause is valid. By technicality, Sophia Blackwell now holds controlling power." Genevieve's eyes blazed with fury. "You think you can destroy me with legal tricks? I built this empire. I made Adrian. I made Lawrence. I made every one of you." Sophia rose, her voice calm but commanding. "No, you broke them. You broke every person who ever tried to love you, who ever tried to carve a life beyond your control. Your empire is not built on strength. It is built on fear. And fear, Genevieve, is brittle." She turned to the board, her gaze sweeping across it like a blade. "You have a choice. Follow a matriarch who has embezzled from her own company and manipulated family and fortune alike. Or follow a new vision, one where transparency replaces secrets, where loyalty is earned, not extorted, where survival does not demand silence." The murmurs swelled into debate, the balance tipping. Genevieve slammed her hands onto the table. "Lies! She weaves fantasies while she plots her revenge. You are all fools if you believe her." Celine rose from the back, the recorder in her hand. Then perhaps you should hear the truth from your mouth, Genevieve. The recorder clicked, and Genevieve's voice filled the boardroom. Cold, damning words. Admissions of withheld medication, of orchestrated betrayals, of financial manipulations. The blood drained from Bernard's face. The board members stiffened, their expressions shifting from doubt to horror. "Enough," Genevieve hissed, lunging for the device. But Sophia intercepted her, steady, unyielding. "You always underestimated me," Sophia said. "You thought I was just a pawn, just as you underestimated Vivian, Isabel, every woman you crushed beneath your heel. But pawns can cross the board, and when they do, they become queens." The phrase rang out like a shot. The queen's gambit, the sacrifice of innocence for control of the center, the move Genevieve had never anticipated. The vote was called. One by one, the board members raised their hands, against Genevieve, for Sophia. The empire shifted in real time. Genevieve's face twisted, not in defeat, but in something darker. "You believe you have won," she whispered, "but victory is poison. It seeps into your veins, it makes you ruthless. Look at yourself, Sophia. Look at the woman you have become. You are me, and one day you will realize it." Sophia leaned in close, her voice soft but sharp enough to cut glass. "The difference between us, Genevieve, is that I know when to stop playing the game." Security entered at the board's signal. Genevieve was escorted out, still spitting venom, still proclaiming herself eternal. But her reign had ended. The board dissolved into chaos, papers rustling, voices rising, but Sophia stood silent, her gaze fixed on the door through which Genevieve had vanished. She had won. Yet in her chest the weight of victory pressed heavily. Lawrence approached, his voice low. "You did it. You ended her. But tell me, Sophia, what now? You have power. You have the company. What will you do with it?" Sophia turned, her eyes clear despite the storm within. "I will do what she never could. I will build, not destroy." As the meeting adjourned, Isabel touched Sophia's arm gently. "You gave us hope today. Don't lose yourself in the fire." Sophia nodded, though doubt coiled inside her. Was Genevieve right? Had she already become the thing she fought against? That night, she opened her laptop in the quiet of her room. Emails, contracts, and strategies filled the screen. The empire was hers to reshape, but every decision echoed Genevieve's warning. Winning the game meant she was still playing it. She closed her eyes, her hand resting on her stomach, feeling the faintest flutter of life within. This was why she fought, not for dynasties or empires, but for a child who deserved a world without chains. Outside, the city lights burned, unaware of the dynasty that had just fallen. Sophia whispered into the silence, not a vow or victory cry, but a quiet promise. No more games. The Queen's gambit was complete, but the true test had only just begun. The Blackwell estate had never felt so different. Where once its marble halls echoed with cold commands and sharp rebukes, laughter now seeped through its walls, fragile but real. The portraits of past patriarchs glared down in judgment, yet their dominance was broken, the weight of their legacy no longer absolute. Sophia walked slowly through the gardens at dawn, the morning mist curling around her like whispers of ghosts, finally fading. Her hand rested on her rounded stomach, feeling the steady movement of the child within her. Each flutter was a reminder that she had fought for herself and the future that kicked against her ribs, demanding to be born into a freer world. Adrian appeared behind her, his steps hesitant. He looked thinner, worn from his time in the hospital and the collapse of his illusions. His arrogance had been replaced by vulnerability, perhaps even humility. He stopped a few paces away, unwilling to intrude, yet unable to turn back. "You should be resting," he said softly. Sophia did not look at him immediately. "And you should be rebuilding what's left of yourself." Adrian gave a small, humorless laugh. "I'm trying. Therapy helps. More than I expected.
For the first time, I'm seeing myself not as my mother's heir, but as a man who has made mistakes that nearly destroyed the only person who ever truly believed in him." Finally, she turned. His face was drawn, his steel-gray eyes no longer cold, but searching. "Belief is earned," she replied, "and belief can be lost. But it can also be rebuilt, brick by brick, if you fight for it." He nodded slowly. "Then that is what I will do. For you, for our family, for this child, even if she is not mine by blood." Sophia studied him for a long moment before nodding once. "Then you may have a place in the world we are building." They walked together through the dew-laden paths, silent but united in fragile peace. By mid-morning, the board gathered again, but this time it was not war that filled the room. The restructuring Sophia had proposed was official. Warren Manufacturing remained under Adrian's care, a stripped-down version of the empire once meant to enslave him. Deca Innovations, Sophia's creation, took flight as the spearhead of progress. Now tempered by responsibility, Lawrence oversaw the family trust alongside Isabel, ensuring no single hand would ever again strangle the dynasty. When the papers were signed, there was no applause, no grand celebration, only relief. The empire had fractured, but something new had been planted from its ruins. Later, Sophia convened her allies in the sunlit conservatory. Vivian, elegant as ever, had flown in to witness the conclusion of what she once started. Celine sat quietly, stripped of her mask, seeking redemption through truth. Miranda, glowing with the quiet confidence of her revived career, reviewed documents while Isabel poured tea with steady hands that no longer trembled under her mother's gaze. Sophia stood at the head, her voice steady. "Genevieve's rules no longer bind us. We are no longer playing her game. Each of us has carried scars from her cruelty, but those scars will not define us. What we build next will." Vivian raised an eyebrow, her lips curving faintly. "You speak like a woman who has already forgiven." Sophia shook her head. "Forgiveness is not what I offer, only closure. She destroyed too much for forgiveness, but I will not let her shadow dictate my every move. That is freedom." Lawrence leaned forward, his gaze sharp but softened by rare sincerity. "And what of Adrian? Do you trust him again?" Sophia hesitated, then spoke with careful truth. "Trust is not a gift. It is a choice renewed every day. He has chosen to change. I will wait to see if he continues to choose it." Celine lowered her eyes. "And me, what place is there for someone who once played a part in your destruction?" Sophia regarded her, the silence stretching until it felt unbearable. Then she said, "You are proof that roles can be rewritten. If you wish for redemption, earn it, not with words, but with actions. If you are willing to fight for it, there is a place for you." Tears welled in Celine's eyes, but she nodded. By evening, the estate hosted a dinner unlike any it had seen. No calculated displays of power, no venomous whispers. Instead, it was a gathering of survivors who had endured Genevieve's iron grip and emerged, fractured but alive. The long dining table was filled not with allies in conquest, but with people learning to be family again. Adrian carefully carved the roast, his movements tentative, as though every gesture was an apology. Lorenz poured wine, offering it with a rare smile. Isabel and Marie spoke in low voices, bridging years of silence with hesitant trust. Vivian and Matthias debated art and business, their laughter startling in its normalcy. Sophia sat at the center, watching them all, her hand resting protectively over her child. For the first time, she felt the faint stirrings of peace. Not the peace of victory, but the peace of possibility. Later that night, she stood alone on the terrace. The stars spread wide above her. Adrian joined her quietly, carrying 2 glasses of water instead of wine. He handed her one, and for a moment, their hands brushed. "You were magnificent today," he said. "You ended her reign. You became everything she feared." Sophia sipped her water, her eyes on the horizon. "And yet I wonder if becoming everything she feared means I have become her." Adrian shook his head fiercely. "No, she tried to control. You destroyed to free. There is a difference. I see it now, even if I was blind before." She turned to him, searching his face for lies. But she saw only weariness, regret, and something that might have been love. "Love is not enough," she whispered. "No," he agreed, "but choice is. And I choose you, not the empire, not her legacy, you." Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to nod. "Then prove it, every day. For this child, for us." He bowed his head, as though in oath. "I will." When dawn came again, Sophia stood at the window of her room, cradling her swollen belly. The first light bathed the estate, gilding the old stone in gold. For generations, this house had been a prison dressed as a palace. But now, it could be something else. Behind her, Adrian stirred, his presence quiet but steady. She glanced back at him, then out at the horizon once more. The war was over, but the story was not. Life stretched before her, uncertain, uncharted, but filled with the promise of beginnings. Her child kicked, a strong, insistent reminder of the future that demanded to be written not in chains but in freedom. Sophia smiled, a rare and unguarded smile. "This is not the end," she whispered to the morning. "This is only the beginning."